Okay, welcome to my sixth posted chess game. This is also a blitz game. I forget exactly the time limit. It's probably 5 minutes, 5 seconds. That's what I usually play. 5 minutes for the game and then 5 seconds for each additional move. Today, what I wanted to look at is a little bit more of a positional game. Not too much in the way of fireworks, but I wanted to show this game really because it illustrates a principle that I've found as I've become a little bit of a better player, and that is extra space is great, but be careful of overcommitting your pawns too early in the game. Even if it looks like you're gaining all this extra space and gaining all this extra play. My opponent over here really overcommitted his pawns, and that's what eventually cost him the game. I was playing the black pieces, as with most of the videos that I happen to post. He started off d4, I played d5, then he plays e3, kind of a little bit of a overly defensive opening. d4 in general is a defensive opening in terms of where it starts. I play knight f6. Why not, try to control the center? If he's not going to take control of this square, then why not try to do that? Also establish whenever I start with a d pawn or a c pawn opening, I very often think that I'm going to fianchetto the bishop over here. So if this pawn is going to stay here, you might as well bring the knight out. Try to get. It's going to take 3 moves to castle the king, so you want to try to get started. He plays knight d2. Again, I think an overly defensive opening because he's trying to set up. I guess his initial strategy at the beginning of the game is to set up a queenside pawn expansion, and that's what he did. And so you don't want to play the knight to c3 if you're going to if you want to move the c pawn up. So he plays his knight to d2. I played g6. Again, I want to fianchetto my bishop so that I can castle. Just make sure to get out of trouble before, especially when I'm playing black. I want to make sure to get my king to safety as fast as possible. He plays c4, immediately expanding on the queen side. So now we have a position that looks like pretty similar to a queen's gambit decline type of position over here, but it's just a few moves later. Now I'm not interested in taking the pawn. If I take the pawn, then he just takes it out. Takes it with the bishop. It's not even a gambit at all. He takes the pawn back immediately, and now he's got a pawn majority in the middle. My knight's a little vulnerable if the e pawn decides to march up the board. So I certainly don't want to take it right away. So it's defended once. I don't have to defend it right away. So I played my bishop to g7 to fianchetto the bishop again. He plays c5. Now over here, this is where he started, which you'll see, as we move further in the game. He wants to try to really expand on the queen side with his pawns. Looks like it kind of hems in my pieces over here. That it certainly does, but as you'll see a little bit later on, it's a bold move certainly, but it's certainly not an attacking move. It's certainly not a move where that's really able to get your pieces into the game. It's the kind of thing where you want a positional advantage. You want to open up a lot of room for yourself. So I castled. Why not get my king to safety? That's really been every move I've done so far in the game. After the first move, after d5, was to get this nice fianchettoed bishop with the castled position with the knight over here. A very safe little niche over here for my king. He plays b4, again, further expanding on the queen side. Now I played bishop g4. Now, I played bishop g4 over here, obviously threatening the queen, so he's got to do something about it. I figure, look, if he plays f3, so then he's really provoked the pawn weakness over here. I can move my bishop back, perhaps to d7, which is, probably a spot where I wanted that bishop anyway, and then this pawn is going to be kind of a backwards pawn, because it has a pawn over here, it has a pawn over here that it's going to have to protect, so I think that would develop a little bit of a pawn weakness. If he puts his knight over here, then he retains the pin. Then it stays pinned. Then he may have to play h3 eventually to kick the bishop, but that may waste the tempo for him or so. And if he moves the queen, okay, then I have a nice, well-placed bishop over here, and I've gotten him to move his queen probably a little bit earlier than he would have wanted to. And if he puts the bishop in front, if he plays bishop e7, so then I'll just trade it off. I have no problem with doing that because that's really his strong bishop. Generally the strong bishop is the one that is not on the color of all of your pawns, because the bishop that's on the color of all your pawns is hemmed in. Look at his dark squared bishop over here. It can't get out on this diagonal, it can't get out on this diagonal. Unless some of these pawns clear up over here, that dark squared bishop is going to be a pretty bad piece. The light squared bishop, on the other hand, has a lot of wonderful alleys in which to run, so if he puts his bishop over here, I'll gladly trade him off. So he plays f3. Again, I think exposing a little bit of a pawn weakness. So I played back to d7, bishop d7, which I really didn't mind having the bishop in that square anyway. I could still put the knight on this square, which is eventually what I did. Now he plays a4, again continuing his queenside expansion. He wants to try to drive, give himself plenty of room over here. Notice that he's got a really, nice expanded area behind his pawns on the queenside over here, but he's neglected development a little bit over here. His knight's here, his bishop's here. Now, I'm not in attacking position at all, so I'm not in a position to exploit it immediately. So I guess that's why I figured safe in doing it. I played knight c6. I've got to develop that piece. That's really the only place to develop it. I can't develop it to d7, obviously, because my bishop is there. I certainly don't want to put it on the rim over here. As they say, the knight on the rim is grim, or the knight on the rim is dim, or whatever other cliche you want to use. And it's especially bad in this position, because if he plays, if he ever, at any point in the game later on, plays this pawn over to b5, then my knight is really going to have to go back. It's not going to have any place to move. But he played b5 anyway. Now, my knight really has only one place to move. I don't want to move it here. I don't want to move it to the a-file. First of all, I'm putting it on the edge. Second of all, if he ever attacks it, it's going to be a little bit difficult to defend it. I could defend it with the b-pawn. That b-pawn could be traded off. I'm not interested in... And once I put it over here, there's really no place it can go. I mean, it can go here, but then it's subject to being traded off by this bishop. Can't go here because the queen is in this spot. So I don't want to put my knight, so I bring my knight back. Again, now, if you look at this position over here, it really looks like he has a very expansive position on the queen side. He's got all of this room, and he's got these really advanced pawns. And I wasn't worried about that. Even though my pieces are hemmed in, this knight is in very bad position. This rook hasn't been developed and is unlikely to be able to be developed to a good square anytime soon. But I really wasn't worried over here because although he was, getting a good position with his pawns, or getting an advanced position with his pawns, that could eventually be a weakness. Because, really, if you look at the top of this chain over here, this e-pawn, which is kind of supporting the whole chain over here, is a backwards pawn, and it could provoke some weaknesses later on in the game. He plays his queen to b3. I'm not really threatening this pawn because it's protected, but still, his plan is clearly a queenside expansion over here, which he's going to have plenty of room to do. Now, I played a6. I have to break this pawn chain eventually. I can't, I have to try to bust through a little bit over here. I don't want him to later on, let's say, put the rook and the queen, get a battery over here, and then eventually play, play b6, and then try to trade off this pawn. So I play a6, challenging his pawn structure. He plays bishop b2, again trying to expand a little bit. I played rook e8. I want to try to expand in the middle. Again, I'm not particularly worried about what's going on over here. I can take, and then, he can retake with the pawn, but, I don't really see the necessity to do that immediately. I wanted to get my rook on the same file as his king, which is certainly, you never know when that's going to be, when that's going to help, and if that's especially good in this game, because in this game, if the middle ever clears up, his king could be a little vulnerable.